that we want to show other people. That's unlikely, but it might happen. So as everyone knows, we are moving back into starting up residentials or field-based courses. We were calling them field-based courses. We're back to calling them residential courses now. We had stopped for a while, mostly because of the pandemic, but we're hoping that the pandemic is winding down and that by next June, travel is going to be feasible again. For people in the U.S. already, it's fine to travel. Hopefully by next summer, we'll be able to have people coming in from overseas as well. So our first residential is going to be in Appalachia, which is the area where Future Generations University is headquartered. And it's going to be a 13-day trip going through Appalachia, mostly in West Virginia, but also touching a little bit in Kentucky and Southwest Virginia as well. So we're just gonna do a quick overview. I'm gonna introduce you to the course leaders, and then we'll do a quick overview of the objectives of the residential, the itinerary. We'll go through and talk a little bit about what our tentative schedule is in each location. And then we'll go over some of the nuts and bolts at the end of the presentation, and then open it up for questions at the end. All right, here we go. We have our two course leaders. They are with us today. We have Luke Taylor-Ide, who has essentially grown up with Future Generations University. He is now the director of the Appalachian program, among other things, at Future Generations. And Jenny Totten has just joined us. She used to work at the West Virginia hub and is now working on the Appalachian program. And it is essentially all of Jenny and Luke's contacts that make this whole residential possible. So they're going to be an amazing duo to travel with, and I'm jealous that I can't be there with you guys, because it sounds like it's gonna be a lot of fun. So the course objectives, this is from the website. You're gonna see examples of seed scale applied in the Appalachian context. People aren't necessarily calling it seed scale in most or all of these cases, but you can take what you've learned in your courses at Future Generations University and see how people are applying some aspects of seed scale in the Appalachian context. You'll meet with different leaders of several organizations throughout the region who are working on problem of food insecurity, but also other issues of community development. You visit communities with early successes in one thing, and then have scaled up and built on those successes to lead to improvements in other areas. You'll see how small investments in arts and culture have led to revitalization sort of throughout the region. And finally, although it's not finally, it's actually one of the first things you'll do, we'll have a commencement ceremony on North Mountain at Future Generations University for those who are finishing up their degree. Quick overview of the itinerary then. People who are flying in will have one pickup at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on June 10th at Dulles International Airport outside of Washington, D.C. If you want to arrive early and visit DC on your own, or leave late at the end of the trip and stay on and do some sightseeing in DC, of course you're welcome to do that. But we'll be picking you up at Dulles International Airport, and then driving to Franklin, West Virginia. That's about a 2-hour drive. For those of you who aren't going to fly in, we can talk at the end about what your other options are. But if you're going to fly in, make it one way or the other to Dulles Airport. So we'll be in Franklin for a couple of days. Franklin is the town sort of down in the valley. Future Generations University is up on North Mountain, just outside of Franklin. You will be staying in a couple of different places in town. It's a small town, so there are no motels or hotels or anything like that. So we'll have Future Generations has a guest house, and there's some other places that where we'll be putting you up. Spend some time here, get to know Future Generations staff and faculty. Have that commencement ceremony, and then head south, mostly south, to Hillsborough, West Virginia, and Lewisburg area. Spend some time there, do a couple of things, and then head west, sort of west northwest to Charleston, which is the capital of West Virginia. Spend a couple of days there. That's gonna be a Friday and a Saturday. On the 17th, then, which is a Sunday, you'll head southwest through the southern coal fields of West Virginia and into Kentucky. Spend some time in Whitesburg, in and around the Whitesburg area in Kentucky, and then start making your way back to Dulles through Blacksburg, Virginia, which is in the southwestern part of the state. Spend a night there, and then we end up, for those who are going back to the DC area, end up at Dulles Airport by noon. So you can have a mid to late afternoon flight out from Dulles. So that's a quick overview of the itinerary, and I'm going to hand it over to Jenny and Luke to go over just some of the details, maybe a minute or so on each slide, just to give you an idea of what they're going to show you, what you guys are going to do, and then, like I said, we'll end with some nuts and bolts and some questions. So let me let Luke talk here, and I think Jenny already can talk if she wants.
Great. So can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Well, yeah, once again, Chris has given a great overview. And so Chris, sorry, once again, I was actually talking to you. I didn't have microphone access. So what exactly are we doing at this point? Just a general overview per slide, or just some kind of a general introductions as on the whole?
Yeah, just a general overview, or an overview of what you're going to do in each place. So, for example, in West Virginia, in Franklin, we've got a couple things planned. And I'm just going to say, in general, this is still a tentative itinerary. We're going to be tweaking things as we go along, but just in general, Luke, what you and Jenny are thinking of doing in each place.
Sure. So what I'll do, probably the fastest way for do that is I'll do everything to Franklin and Hillsborough, and then Jenny may pick it up in Charleston, where she's much more familiar with the southern portion of the state. But certainly, I'm born and raised in Franklin, West Virginia, and not only was I was born and raised here, but so was Future Generations. And so it'll be a great opportunity to see and hear from not only myself, but hopefully Daniel, some of the other faculty will have all had along the way. There will be a commencement ceremony here at that time. So great way to, even if you're not commencing, to be there in solidarity with your classmates who are, and certainly a chance to meet many of your faculty in person. But while we're there, we also will be looking at some of the broader issues confronting rural American towns, and really looking even at some of the initial issues around how was a group like Future Generations received in a small town. And so we'll get a lot of chances to really look at that, and look at some of the historical scope of work that not only Future Generations has been involved with, but looking also at many of the local community engagement activities that many of our both faculty and staff engage in their free time. We have a lot of civic engagement. And so I think it'll be a great opportunity to hear firsthand of how different people have really started to get the change process started, but also looking at some issues around civic leadership. And so I think one of the most exciting is we are in a position to convene a fun expert panel of local governance leaders that we work with regularly here. And really one of the things we'll be highlighting throughout, for those of you who know Seed Scale so well, is obviously we're going to be looking for successes all along the way, but we're really also at each stop going to be looking or trying to give some perspective to the different viewpoints of all three partnerships. So we'll be getting bottom up perspectives, top down perspectives, and outside in. And this will get really interesting as we go through, because in Franklin, it will all be very local, town and county. But once we get to the state and we start to work in Charleston, you will start to see some of the top down perspective at that state and even regulatory levels. So that's how we'll kick things off. And then if we want to go to the Hillsborough slide. So Hillsborough, in Hillsborough, we're going to really start to look at several fun dynamics. We have several partner organizations based out of Hillsborough. So that will be the opportunity to really, one of the things I'm most excited about is sharing for everybody some real exposure to all of the work that Future Generations Appalachian program has done around building out the agroforestry sector for the entire state. We recently actually just got funding to create an Appalachian-wide agroforestry network. And a lot of that work really started in Pendleton and then down in Pocahontas counties. And so we will have the opportunity to meet with some of our educational partners there, as well as meet with some of our local farmers and outdoor education center there called the U Mountain Center. And that will be kind of one of those 2 days. We'll be staying in Hillsborough, but also then going in on the other portion of we're there for several days. We will also be going down and around the town of Lewisburg, which Lewisburg, West Virginia in 2011 was voted coolest small town in America. So we're going to have to go figure out whether or not that's true and why it might be and why it isn't. But certainly Lewisburg is a small town that has national recognition for its tourism, especially, and other economic revitalment. And we're going to do a critical analysis of that and hopefully meet with some of the local leaders there. So we really start to move from very rural to now some communities, especially towns that are starting to maybe be a little bit further more along the spectrum, certainly denser area. And then we will be headed to Charleston, which is the most densely populated region in the state. And as we mentioned, it's the state capital. So here we see my dear friend, Reverend James Patterson, who is an alumni of the very first Future Generations Masters class. And Reverend Patterson will be seeing many sites. I'll let Jenny talk about all the others. But one of the great things we'll get to hear about from Reverend Patterson is what he's done with his master's degree over the past 20 years and how he has used Seed Scale to really build and use his place in the pulpit as a Black minister to create an NGO called Partnership for African American Churches and re-engaging churches as a place of community. I can tell you, having taken students to see Reverend Patterson before, this is going to be a really fun and full day. Jenny, I will hand it over to you to talk a bit more about some of the other things we may touch on in Charleston before heading to the Southern Coalfields.
Sure. Okay. So like Luke said, we're visiting with Reverend Patterson. I like to think of his work as more of like a very large systems approach to things that grew out of very grassroots into this large system. And then we're going to talk with another group that's doing work kind of in the same geographic area on the west side of Charleston, which is very population wise, it's small. It has the same wonderful and sometimes confusing and sometimes weird things about it as a large inner city space. And so there's a group of basically kids who grew up on the west side that became adults that are now working to solve community issues and meet their community where they're at, and kind of building an entire system to help people figure out how to revitalize the economy, redevelop, et cetera, and so on. Additionally, when we're in Charleston, we're also going to go, there are two very small municipalities in the eastern part of Kanawha County, which is where Charleston is, Montgomery and Smithers. They're literally maybe a quarter mile apart. So they have agreed to work together in a very interesting government structure where they've created a strategic initiatives council. So the two communities work together and share resources. And so we're going to get to talk to both the mayors of both of those towns and kind of how that whole process worked. And you guys can evaluate the process, but then also learn from them and maybe take it home and work on some dual initiatives in your own communities. And then additionally in Charleston, I'm working on us maybe taking a trip to visit a couple of like community gardens or local food access projects that are in that specific community. In Charleston, you see a lot of traditional solving of food access problems. And because we're going to see some rural solutions later, I wanted us to get a kind of a base in Charleston. All right, so when we leave Charleston, we're going to take the long way to Kentucky so that we can drive through the southern coal fields. So part of this is to orient you to what we're going to see in Eastern Kentucky and Southwest Virginia and Southern West Virginia. But also, I am from McDowell, or I'm not from, I live in McDowell County now, and I could probably say I'm from there. I've been there for 7 years now. But so we're going to go down there. We're going to talk with the local paper. And so we have a small town paper, it's the Welch News. And it's a very interesting story where local leadership, the power was returned to the local leadership of the paper a number of years ago. And so number one, I want you to hear their story, but number two, interact with them about what happens when the local people actually get to tell their own story. And that story is kind of elevated to the state level because it's this very interesting success story. And then we also are going to talk to a group of, there's a youth-owned cooperative in the Southern Coalfields that's working on food access. And so they have a couple of production sites at school sites, and a couple of them are producing on their own land. And so some members of that cooperative and the teacher that helped organize them are kind of set together to talk with you all about what that process looks like to work with youth that are heavily disenfranchised, and then how you end up letting them take control and have power over their own decisions. Once we leave, so this is just a day trip. This is like on our way. So we're going to go through there and then we'll end up in Whitesburg, Kentucky. And in Whitesburg, we're actually going to go to a couple of, we're staying in Whitesburg for several days. And so one of the days we're going to work with and meet with Apple Shop. And so they are a large scale Appalachian-based media outlet, and that kind of grew out of some individual storytelling many years ago, and then worked to kind of conserve and preserve the Appalachian storytelling tradition. And now they've become this advocacy organization in many ways too. And so just a little bit about their journey. And then we'll go over to Hazard, Kentucky. So Hazard has an interesting model with its local leadership where they engage middle school to college age youth in an internship program where those folks are actually taking the roles of like county commissioners and city commissioners in their community during the summer. They get paid to do it, but they're working to solve problems that they see in their own community. And it's funded by the city, which is pretty cool. And then we are also going to, while we're in Whitesburg, we're actually incredibly close to Southwest Virginia. It's literally across the river. And so we are going to take a trip over into Duffield, Virginia to talk with Appalachian Sustainable Development. And so up until this point, you will have seen small applications of local food production and aggregation and distribution. Appalachian Sustainable Development is the large, we've built the whole system to get food produced in Central Appalachia up and down the Eastern Seaboard. And so we will talk with them, and it's been a 10 to 15 year process to get them to this point. And so they want to share their story. And then once we leave Whitesburg, we're taking.
Jenny, I'm sorry, before you move on, Valerie
Yeah.
had asked what was the name of that cooperative that you were talking about back in
Yep.
I guess
So
the youth
yep.
cooperative for food?
Yep. So it's the McDowell County Youth Producers Association. I can put it in the chat so everybody can see it.
Okay.
Okay. Not a problem. Always interrupt. Okay. And so then once we arrive in Blacksburg, which is so Virginia Tech is there. It's a very large university. And so you'll kind of see the like effect that that's had on a very small community. So Blacksburg itself is very small. The university is very large. But so what we're going to do there is we'll go down to Floyd, Virginia, if working on it, partially for entertainment so that you guys can just have a little bit of fun, but also the Floyd Country Store has been in existence for 50 years, I believe, maybe 100 years, 50 or 100 years. I'll have to look on that. But they started with doing open mic night, old time Appalachian music jams, and now have become the center of economic development and the center of cultural preservation for Southwest Virginia. So it's also a really neat story, but also those folks are incredibly open to sharing with others the hows and the whys and the where we had some hurdles. And so I expect rich conversation and you guys to have a really fun time there. And then we'll also focus on in Blacksburg. It's an interesting case of like the three-way partnership. So it's a place where grassroots development as well as government and not an NGO development are all working together to build some economic activity within the region. And then so we'll spend the night in Blacksburg, and then the next day we head back to DC for everybody to catch your planes.
All right. So thank you, Jenny and Luke. That was great. So just a couple of nuts and bolts. I want to emphasize that this is a course. This isn't just a trip. It's going to be a really fun course, but it's a course. So coursework will be required in order to earn credit. And we'll have more details on that as the winter and spring go on. So the cost of this, but you can decide to take this either as a 2-credit course or a 3-credit course. The 3-credit course will have a little bit more work before and after the residential itself. The cost is essentially the same as taking a regular course. So the cost is $500 per credit hour, and if you have a scholarship, let's say you have a $200 per credit hour scholarship, then you will pay $300 per credit hour for the course, depending on how many. So it's either $600 or $900, depending on how many credits you take. The travel costs to get to Dulles, to get to Dulles and go away from Dulles are not covered. So I'm sorry. Let me rephrase that. So starting in Dulles and ending at Dulles, everything is included by a generous gift from a donor. The costs, so accommodations, transportation, most meals, they're all included. There can be some meals that we leave unscheduled just because that's part of the fun of traveling to a new place, is to go out and do some exploring on your own. So those are going to be unscheduled. And the travel costs to and from Dulles, and includes passport or visa costs if you're coming from overseas, are not included. For those of you who need visas, we will provide letters of invitation for your visa applications, and we'll provide some guidance on that. Accommodations are going to be in shared rooms. If you need a single room, you can, there'll be a supplement you can pay a little extra for a private room where available. And there might be some places, some parts along the trip where we're staying in relatively small accommodations where we just won't have enough, we won't have the space to give a lot of single rooms out. But where available, if you want it and pay for it, you can have a single room. That's kind of it for the nuts and bolts. What questions do you have? I'm going to unmute all once I figure out how to do this. But if you have any questions, if you want to raise your hand or put it in the Q&A, then that would work too. I'll just click on everybody here. All right, so everyone is allowed to talk if you want. So jump in if you don't have any questions. I'll sort of leave the mics open for a little bit. Valerie asks, okay, so what time should you plan on arriving in Franklin if you are driving yourselves? So the pickup is at 2. You should probably plan to get to Franklin by 4 in the afternoon on Friday. We encourage you, if you're going to drive to Franklin, there's going to be a little bit of logistics. We encourage you to ride on the buses throughout the trip, so that because those drive times where a lot of discussion can happen, and a lot of processing about what you've seen or what you're going to see happens. So if you're going to drive to Franklin, or if you're going to meet the group down in the area, we'll just have to figure out how to get you back to Franklin. And one possibility is to not drive to Franklin, but to drive to Harrisonburg in Virginia, which is right off the highway. And we'll be passing that both on the way to Franklin and on the way back from Blacksburg. So that might just make more sense to sort of park in Harrisonburg, and then meet the bus or the vans as they come through Harrisonburg, and we'll figure out the timing then. That would probably be closer to 3:30.
Okay. Myself and Robert were discussing riding down together because we're only about 4 hours away.
Okay. All right. Yeah, certainly. And that doesn't make sense to fly, right? So yeah. Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, and I think especially one of the points here I will say is we are we've got the rough itinerary laid out. We are still finalizing any number of particulars with site visits and that sort of thing. So both for the ease of logistics, and we've got a lot of people going a lot of places, and obviously we want to minimize the carbon footprint for everybody as much as possible. But also, the sooner you let us know if you're interested, the sooner Jenny and I can start to factor in your previous work, your communities, and we will. I want to say, try to make sure everybody gets some individualized learning experiences through this. In the past, when I've done this, we were able to. We had a great example of a young lady who was trying to set up a recycling program. So we got her in front of several groups with really cool recycling programs that she took on for professional networking. So obviously you can sign up. It's open shifting enrollment, but if you know you want to come, the sooner that you begin that process, it helps us both for logistics, but also will probably be a richer learning experience for everyone.
And so if you want to, if you want to register, you can go to the website that was included in my email, in my little nudge email that I sent out yesterday. You can click on the register now, and since you are all students, it's a really easy process. It's just basically your name and your email address. So that's pretty easy to do. Any other questions? I see you've unmuted yourself, Melchiad.
Hello, everybody. I got an internet issue. I didn't follow well the presentation,
Okay,
but I had a question.
sure.
I would like to have some clarification for each credit of the residential course and the implication both on academic program and on the cost of on the cost.
Okay. So so the cost of the program to Future Generations University students is just the cost of tuition. So so whatever you are paying in tuition for regular courses is what you pay for this trip. In addition to that, you will need, you would need to get yourself here. So you need to get from Burundi to the United States. And that includes your flights to get over here, any visa or passport costs, and any sort of other miscellaneous expenses that you need to get over here. Any sort of personal expenses that you have, those are all your costs. You're not that's not covered in the cost of the program. And there are a couple of essentially one, for the most part, one dinner per destination. For the most part, we're going to have unscheduled so that you would need to buy dinner for yourself maybe 4 or 5 times. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
The course have credit options, 3 credit options, 2 credit options, 0 credit options. If someone who takes 0 credit options, what are the implications?
So if you take it for no credits, of course you don't get any credit, but then yes, the trip would essentially be free for you. We assume that most students, most current students need or want credit. But if you are currently a student and don't want or need the credits, then yes, and you want to take part in the trip, then yes, the trip would be free for you, plus all those other costs I mentioned that you have to all those costs that you have to take into consideration to get here. But if you want to take 3 credits, then it would the cost of the course would be the cost of any other course at Future Generations for you. If you take 2 credits, it's the cost of taking 2 credits. So it really depends on how many credits you need. So if you've earned or will have earned 30 credits by June, and you only need 2 credits to graduate, then you would only really want to take you would take this for 2 credits, and that would be it. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. So Matt says, any idea of what the pre and post workload will look like, or could you share an example from the past? I'm gonna let Luke take a stab at that, since he's done more of this and is designing the course.
Sure. So great question, Matt. I'm glad you asked it. Always good to know what you're getting in for, and also just good to hear from you. I hope all's going well out there in Colorado. The basic course load is still kind of coming into focus. The pre-course load will probably be largely reading based. There would be a lot of reading, both about the geopolitical history here, some of the history that really undercuts this. And then we will probably also be assigning out some individual case studies and that sort of thing ahead of time to just kind of familiarize yourself more in depth with some of the sites we'll be visiting. The primary post residential work, which is, as I said, it's kind of the pre and post equals the full extra credit. So a lot of the probably 1/3 will be before. I would say 2/3 of the like work, when you think of turning an assignment, would either be done during or afterwards. And probably you're going to have a richer experience if you do as much of this as you go as possible. And we will try to keep some time and get everybody to Wi-Fi. I think in pretty much every location where we're staying the night. And that will probably be building out a reflective journal. And then for anybody who's taken the mapping course, I know that you all have had done some journaling. And so we will probably be having you keep a reflective journal, both on your experience, but then also on your experience during the residential. But then it wouldn't end at the residential. You'll have a one up if you've been keeping up to date. And then there would be a second part of the journaling where you are going to reflect and even document how you took professional connections or examples or learning from the residential and applied it back in your own community. So very much in keeping with the fundamental tenets of a good community lab. We want to know both what you learned and also how you were able to use it in your community. It will be more reflective than, at least for, as those of you who've taken my courses before know, that my labs tend to be very much based on going and doing in your community. This would be more reflective.
Excellent. Thank you, Luke. And Maher asks, if I want to graduate during the commencement and I'm missing the 3 credits, will it automatically be considered as I'm joining the residential course or after its end? So yes, if the residential represents your final 3 credits that you need to graduate, then yes, you will be able to walk at commencement. Now, you will not get your official diploma until you complete the course. So we might hand you a folder in the ceremony of it all, but that folder will either be empty or have some little joke note that I will have put in there for you. But you will not be considered officially graduated until you turn in your final work for this course. Does that answer your question, Maher? Well, we'll assume it does.
He mentioned in the chat that he said clear thing.
Sorry, shot. Okay, great. Thank you. Got it. I only have so many windows open at once here. Great. All right. Any other questions? And if any questions come to mind, feel free to email me. You all have my email address. Happy to, or if you want to set up a time to chat. Let me. This is going to be a little hard to do. Well, I will email everyone my my Calendly link. So if anyone wants to set up a meeting with me, you are, I'd love to chat with y'all. So if there aren't any questions, then I will go ahead and end this. Thank you everyone for coming, and we hope to see you all in West Virginia in June. Thanks so much. Bye.
Goodbye.